Hello and welcome to episode 24 of the Story Not Forgotten podcast. We are brought to you by Capturing Legacies, because everyone has a story to tell, and it's time to tell yours. Visit capturinglegacies.com to find out how we can help. My name is Liam Rathgeber, partner and anthologist with Capturing Legacies, as well as your host. And my guest today is one of the most decorated and one of the most celebrated professional wrestlers in the history of the sport. He got his start in Calgary with Stampede Wrestling before going on to international superstardom with the WWF, WCW, WWE. In his career, he's held 32 championships. He's headlined WrestleMania on 3 different occasions. He's a shoo-in, obviously. He's in the Professional Wrestling Hall of Fame as well as the Amateur Wrestling Hall of Fame. In an industry that was really built on hyperbole and exaggeration, there's nobody that would ever argue that he lived up to it when they called him the best there is, the best there was, and the best there ever will be, Bret the Hitman Hart. Bret?
Great to be here.
Thanks. Well, because we do what we do without any ado, why don't you tell us a story?
Well, my story that I was going to tell was just one that was just kind of thought about, but it was funny how, like people say, when did you get into wrestling, and what, when did you know you were going to be a wrestler? It's like, I think I was always going to be a wrestler. Like I was destined for it. Like it didn't matter what I did, I was going to get steered into wrestling. And so many different times and periods in my life where it's like, how do I end up doing this? But it's like I can remember at school, like I didn't know much about wrestling other than what I watched on TV, like any other kid. Anyway, I wrestled with my brothers on Sunday nights and stuff like that, but play around. But we're supposed to be little shooters. We all know how to wrestle. Everyone in the family knows how to wrestle. His dad teaches them and all this stuff. Not necessarily true. But I remember at school as a kid, like wrestling kids. Like a fight would break out, and it's like I'd just leg trip him, take him down, and put him in a sleeper hold or something, or put him in a hammerlock and make him tap out, and put him in a Boston Crab or stuff like that all the time. I put a guy in a camel clutch when I was about grade 4. Pretty good fight I had with somebody on the playground or soccer field, or but wrestling was always like I always remember guys like he knows that wrestling stuff from his dad and all. It's like, no, I don't. I learned that on Stampede Wrestling on Saturday, But I mean, things like that were all my life. I also remember wrestling in high school, and I can remember wrestling a kid that was an American. I was undefeated, which I talked about maybe earlier about doing an interview with Ed Whalen on Stampede Wrestling. And it might have been this specific time as I was undefeated in high school at this time period. I didn't stay undefeated, I don't think, that year. It was also the year I think I broke my collarbone. But anyway, at that time I was undefeated. It was a few months after Christmas, or maybe a month after Christmas. And my dad had asked me how I was doing or something. I said, still undefeated. Nobody's pinned me yet in high school yet. And so I had an interview with Ed Whalen down there. And it was just always like things like that. It's like, you wonder how I got into wrestling. Like, it's like, that's how it all happened. And I also remember wrestling a kid, and he was an American kid, and he was California state champion, and which is, I don't know how great California state is in wrestling back in the 70s. This would be about 73 or 74.
But they've got a lot of people, so you need to know something in order to get to the top.
Well, you can only be as good as the guy that beats you, or vice versa. And I think, I was, like I said, I was undefeated, so I was the guy to beat kind of thing. And this kid was California state champion, and we started wrestling, and he was really good. He was much better than I was. He would have beat me. Well, we give a good fight, and he was really cocky and really just like you think, the brash, blonde-haired, sort of cocky American that thought he was better and knew he was better than me and was going to kind of humble me in front of my school or whatever. And so he was beating me on points, and he wasn't pinning me or anything. I was defensively holding my own, but he had pointed me about, it might have been 6'2" or something, or 6'1". He was up a pretty good space on me, and I wasn't getting very far. He was a really good defensive wrestler. I couldn't seem to get point. Every time I tried to score on him, he would score on me, and it was going to end up kind of not in my favor. But somewhere in there, he got behind me and he stuck his finger in my mouth. I remember and he did it to pull my head back while he had me down. And I remember the first time he did it, it was like kind of stunned me because he stuck his finger right in and really yanked my whole head, which is kind of a pro wrestling trick. Mm-hmm. And I knew when he did it, I thought, oh, that wasn't right. Like, and then I waited a second and I kept my head down in that down position, and he tried it again. He stuck his finger in and did it again. And when he did it again, I bit on his finger as hard as I could. And it's funny because when just before that had happened, we had been wrestling. Both were by the timekeeper table, where the referee or wherever they keep score. But I remember we double hip tossed each other like two pro wrestlers. But we both went. He tried to throw me into the table, and I tried to throw him into the table, and we both went flying into the table and tipped it over, and they had to stop everything. And it was like they kind of warned us then that we would tone it down a bit, that we're getting a little too aggressive. But he was beating me, and I didn't like him, and I was trying really hard. And then that's when he did the thing with his finger. And when he stuck his finger in my mouth the second time and I bit it, he got... I don't know why he was beating me. And he was... But is it okay to swear on this?
Oh, yeah.
So all of a sudden he goes, this fucking guy bit my fucking finger. And he pushed off my back and he threw a whole tantrum on this fucking guy bit my fucking finger. And the coach is like, wait, and anyway, he kept losing it. And then the referee goes, you're disqualified for your bad language. And kicked him. And they suspended him and kicked him out of amateur wrestling for good. And I never had to wrestle him. I ended up winning everything that year. And I always go, that guy would have won everything if he just shut up that day. He had me beat on points. And
so he could have got away with fish hooking you, but the language is what pushed him on.
Yeah, and I remember they tried to get it where it was like we're both suspended because I bit him. And they tried to say, well, why did you bite him? And I said, I didn't bite him. He stuck his finger in my mouth. Why would I bite him? And I said, I can't help it if somebody sticks their finger in my mouth. I said, I just happened to be closing my mouth at the same time that he was sticking his finger in my mouth. What am I going to do? I said, that's not my fault. And they were like, well, he shouldn't be sticking his finger in your mouth anyway. And anyway, it was just kind of funny how wrestling as a kid always sort of presented itself in different ways in my real world, which was not pro wrestling, and but it always was. And another example of that is around the same time period, maybe a year later, I was it was former city champion. I was having trouble that year because there was a really good wrestler from Central Memorial called Bob Eklund, I'm sorry. But he was a really good, really great wrestler. Ended up being a Canadian national champion. And we had beat each other. I think when we finally had our last match, which was I think he was in university and I was in college, we were tied. When it was over, we were tied. He had beat him 3 times and he beat me 3 times or something like that. But he was better at the end than I was. He was a world-class wrestler, and I was a good wrestler. Don't get me wrong, and I'm proud of what I did. But Bob Eklund was a better wrestler, and I was a little more dedicated to that field than I was. But we had some great classic matches, and against each other. And anyway, I had wrestled in the cities. I'm trying to remember the school. Anyway, it was in Calgary here, and I had placed. I got second, and I got beaten by a guy. And there was a guy on my team, a guy named Larry Rinke. His brother was a boxer for the Canadian Olympic team back in around that same time period. They were scrappy, tough guys, and Larry was blind, total blind. But he was a really good wrestler and really strong, and he wanted to be a wrestler, and they let him wrestle, and he competed, and he held his own with everybody. He was really, really good for a guy that was blind. But I practiced with Larry every day he was at my school, and I was like basically the captain and the coach of my team, if I'm not mistaken. And we had some really good wrestlers on my team, but we couldn't get a teacher to sponsor us, so I kind of ended up doing all the teaching and I did everything, including uniforms for the team and everything. But I had placed, I hope I'm telling the story right, but I had placed second, and I was just exhausted. And they were going to take, I knew that I ended up winning the provincials the next week, but the cities, I lost to a guy that I underestimated, and I lost to him. And I was kind of mad, but at the same time, I just wanted to go home. And I had beat everyone that was left in the tournament. And so I had won the silver. And that qualified me to take first and second to the provincials in those days. I was probably about 171 or 172 weight class, or 75 or so, whatever the weight classes were in those days. 177, I think, is what it was. And Larry Rinke was already eliminated. He got eliminated in that tournament. And I remember some coaches had started to drift around at the end of because the tournament was just about over. And it was on, I think it was on a Friday and Saturday night, or maybe a Wednesday, Thursday or something. But I remember it was all the media, funny enough, in those days. I remember some of the media guys from like CFCN and CFAC and all that were there to do the little interview. We're here at the city championships or whatever. The sports guy was there. A couple of them. I remember there's quite a few media people there. And I thought, oh, that's kind of cool. They're covering the wrestling and all that stuff. And anyway, they're going to give the medals out in a few minutes. And the last 2 or 3 matches are taking place. And so these coaches are running around and going, he's still got to wrestle Larry Rinke, his teammate. And I go, he's already been eliminated. So I remember Larry goes, I think they're going to make us wrestle and all that. And I remember pulling him aside. I said, Larry, they're going to make us wrestle. You're already eliminated. Go home. Just get in your car, get out of here. Just get, and then there can't be. If you've left, there is no match. I said, all you can do is, if you wrestle me, you could maybe beat me. And then you're going to eliminate me, and some other kid from another school is going to go in. You're like, you don't want to do that. You want to eliminate I helped you all year, And Larry was like, he was just too straight a guy. He was like, no, if they say I got to wrestle you, I have to wrestle, Anyway, they came up and they said, yeah, I remember they turned they were getting ready to give the medals out, and there was no matches left for quite a while. Everyone's like waiting around, and all of a sudden they go, there's one more match. And it's like, everyone's like, we just want the medals. And it's like, no, there's one more match, everybody. Just hang on. And all of a sudden, and Larry had already done a couple of news stories in the city, and everyone knew the story about this great tough little amateur wrestler that's blind. So I remember people said, when did you have your first bad guy wrestling match? I go, I had my first bad guy wrestling match against Larry Rinke at that school that night, and it was totally real. And it was so funny I was totally the heel. I remember I was so tired too, and I was cranky because I didn't have a good weekend of wrestling that, and I was better wrestler than I did that weekend. But I was so mad at Larry because I told him to get out, and he was so psyched up. He wanted to beat me so bad with all the cameras there and everybody. It would have been a big feather in his cap to beat me. And they were all filming it. Everyone was it was the story. It wasn't about the cities anymore. It's about this, great blind kid. And his brother was an Olympic boxer. And he's going to fight this pro wrestler's son. And I remember I walked out, and the place was all booze. And I remember I was a pretty good wrestler in my own right, and I was pretty mad at Larry. And it's like, and I was like, now let's have this match. I'm gonna give Larry everything I got. And I wrestled my best match that night. I pinned Larry in about maybe 45 seconds or so. But it was always a funny memory to me is how I was a real villain. I got to feel it. Like people say, I was like when you were a bad guy. And I was like, I knew what it was like when I was 17 in high school. And it's always made me laugh how exact they were. They were exactly the same thing. And another, one sort of last story, which is the original story I was going to tell you, but I thought I'd give you some different stories I haven't really told before. But there was a girl that had a crush on me at the wrestling matches. There was another sort of side of it, is I used to go to the wrestling matches, and wrestling, I almost had like I had an alter ego. I don't know if a lot of kids are like that, or maybe they are, they aren't. I think it's cool if you relate to it. Because I was at Bret Hart at Wildwood Elementary School, just Bret Hart from one of the Hart brothers, and I was nobody special. Like, girls didn't like me or anything special about me. I had friends, and I was sort of under the radar most of the time. But at the wrestling matches, I was a whole different guy. I go down to the wrestling matches, I'm Stu Hart's kid. I'm the baddest guy. I'm the baddest 7-year-old that ever put on a pair of Basketmasters, And I believe, like, I don't know what it was. It was like I had to be tougher because it was wrestling and my dad and all that. I had a whole different persona.
You have to carry the family name.
Yeah, and I had, and it's like everything from talking to the policeman, like, outside the dressing room, can you get my dad? And it was like I had a lot of authority and stuff, or Ed Whalen talking to me, or, but it was like being a little bit of like a star. It's kind of hard to explain, but I had a whole different bravado about myself, and talking to girls. I wasn't afraid to talk to girls, and I had girls that had crushes on me, and all the time, girls fighting over me, fist fights, like nasty fights, where I'm like, wow, I don't want either one of them, like stuff like that. But I mean, it makes me laugh now when I remember one girl that had a super crush on me. There were two not very good-looking girls that were at the wrestling matches. Two kind of homely, scraggy-looking things that were absolutely googly-eyed in love with me, or just crazy about me. And they went to my high school. And they were always kind of just hanging around and giggling and kind of chasing me or following me, and somewhere in there, because my dad always taught me to always be nice to every fan. Mm-hmm. Just that's the way it is. They all come down and just always be nice and remember who you are and who puts the food on your table, and we owe everything to the people that come to the show. And so I was always nice, but it was one of those things where the nicer I was, the more infatuated they got, where it's like they thought it'd be cute to sort of run up and attack me all the time and stick snow down my coat collar. And then when I turned around, because I was never like, what that would piss anybody off, mm-hmm. After a while. They kept doing it all the time, and then they'd run off laughing. And sometimes I'd almost like want to chase them down. That's how I even start to chase them, like, want to grab them or do something. Like I was getting really annoyed by it. And they do it at the wrestling matches, and they giggle and act silly all the time. But I was only about 15, 16. And anyway, they went to my high school, and I'd see them in the hallway. And I was always, you're at that age, I would always super rude to them. Get the hell away from me, you stupid. And I'd swear at them and call them names and leave me alone, And I was never very nice to them. But, they were always at the show. Like, there was a point where it got to be kind of a real annoying kind of thing, no more Mr. Nice Guy with them. And they never ever took it as they were always like, it would happen again, the snow on the collar, and, it just was ongoing. And then I remember it was the turkey, it might have been the Christmas thing, it was the Christmas break. And I wasn't in they had a Christmas play, and they had a Christmas dinner all afternoon served in the gymnasium at the school, and everyone in the high school had sold tickets for it, and it was a big event, and we all got out, I think, at noon. And I remember it was like Christmas holiday, and I was done. I was waiting for my dad to pick me up at lunchtime. And I was just there by myself, and they showed up, and it was one of those kind of like now, where there's a bit of a chinook, where there wasn't much snow out there. And it wasn't really, but there had been, and there was lots of ice outside. And so instead of getting a big, nice, friendly ball of snow, they went out and got a bunch of, icicles and sharp pieces of ice, almost like glass. And they came up and rammed that down my back and my neck again while I was sitting there talking to somebody, like talking to a girl or something. And I remember I was so mad, I jumped up. And I remember it was like, I was so mad, and I remember I ran over and I grabbed her and I picked her up, one of them. And I didn't know what to do with her. And I picked her up, and we had a big giant, like, I don't know if you can sort of see from this podcast how big this couch is, but we had a big fountain, like a big, looked like a jacuzzi, but it was round as big as this couch, bigger, with something Griffin in the middle of it or something like that for the school emblem. And it was filled up to your waist with water. And I just walked over, and I remember there was a teacher. He was the not the vice principal, but the next thing down. I don't know what you call him, but he was the finance guy or something like that. But I remember he was like, he looked at me and it was like he kind of like thought I was joking. And I just remember I just picked her up and dropped her right in the hole. Just dropped her head going under the water and coming up, and it was like she came up and all that, and it was like pretty cold outside and all that. And he ran away. He was like, I can't believe you did that. And he really got mad. He lost it. And then I remember I thought it was I had no idea there was anybody there. I thought everyone from the school had left. It just was so funny to drop her in that thing. And I remember he looked at me, he looked around, he goes, just clean it up and I'm not going to say anything. And so, anyway, the part I remember was going to say was that the same girl was at the wrestling matches, and the most embarrassing thing you could ever think of. But she always come up, and in those days I was, of course, I used to work the door for my dad at the ticket, like at the gate where you came through the front doors. And I remember she came up, and it was at intermission or something like that. She just came up, and she was standing right there. And I went, get the fuck out of here and leave me the fuck alone, you fucking idiot. I remember I said, but I was really as mad. And I'd had enough of her. She was driving me crazy, and I really lost it, which was unprofessional. But I was only about 16, and I was not trying to win anybody over that day. And I just remember she goes, I just wanted to introduce you to my dad. And he goes, you son of a bitch. And I was like, holy shit. What a mistake. And anyway, I felt so bad. And he chewed me out. And then I remember I felt terrible. I mean, I was busted right there. And his name was Jim Irvin was his name. He ended up becoming a photographer for some of my first days in wrestling. He took really good pictures. But anyway, the thing was about that he went with her to the seat. He was so mad. He was like ready to punch me out. And he probably could. I was just a kid, so who knows what would. But he was, and rightfully so. He didn't like anyone talking to his daughter like that. And anyway, he came up to me as the show went on. He came up and he said, I apologize for losing my cool back there. I didn't know you guys were joking around. She goes, yeah, he jokes around like that with me all the time. It's just, we're all, anyway, like we're like best of friends, and we all see, I dropped her in the fountain and all that stuff. And she went to bat for me and kind of made out like, and I guess in her own mind, she always thought that it was all in fun, like that I was never serious, and I ended up, and we actually kind of became, okay with each other after that, because it was like, oh yeah, that funny time with your dad, it was like, but anyway, so those are my stories for you, just kind of laying out some of how wrestling sort of always impacted my life, even in ways where it's like you never think it would, and how, I never hold in my mind a whole lot difference from like school fights. I can remember school fights at, like we're sitting in my classroom waiting for the 3:30 bell to ring, and all the girls in my class are looking at me, wiping tears out of their eyes and stuff, like, you're gonna get killed, and it's like, no, I'm not. And I was like, it's like, you just kind of knew. It's like, I remember thinking, always thought out my wrestling matches. I would always map out what I was going to do, almost like choreograph in my mind what's going to happen and how I want to pace my match and the moves I'm going to do at the end. And, there's a certain thought process that goes into building your fight plan, even in pro wrestling or any fight. And I, when I think back to school fights and things like that, it was like, there was so much of that, like planning how you're going to you're fighting against a guy that's clearly tougher than you and bigger than you and 2 grades bigger, and you just think about, I'm going to go for his legs, I'm going to do that, and you have all these things that you have in your head, and and then just years later you're in a dressing room going, okay, well then I'm going to take you down, and I'm going to, it's like, it's really not something that I didn't just fall into wrestling. I think I was aimed right into it, and it's funny how many, as I get older now, when I look back on, reflect on old memories and stuff, but and I wouldn't change anything. I love all of it. It's a great. It was a great life, and still is, being Bret Hart.
Well, Bret, thank you so much for taking the time to share, for inviting me and us into your home and sharing for the Ed Whalen Project. I've been a fan pretty much as long as I can remember. So it's a real honor to be here and getting the chance to meet you.
Well, I'm happy to anything for Ed Whalen and Nomi and the whole family, and they're like family to me. So I'm happy to be part of anything that is good for them.
Well, thank you so much.
Okay.
I hope you've enjoyed this episode of A Story Not Forgotten. If you have, make sure to head over to iTunes or the Google Play Store, hit that subscribe button so that you never miss a future episode. While you're there, we would really appreciate it if you left us a rating or a review. The more of those we have, the higher we'll appear in the search results, allowing us to find more guests and bring more stories to more of you. If you have a story that you'd like to share, reach us at capturinglegacies.com and we'll get you on the show. And until next time, remember, everybody's got a story to tell, and it's time to tell yours.